Good morning. A couple of things about the sessions, or before we go into the session, maybe I just introduce everybody, or I introduce myself and then hand over to my my co-speakers here. My name is Michael Weitzel. I work with BlackBerry and the developer relations team. I'm based in South Africa and support Sub-Saharan Africa, and have got two very competent co-speakers here. I hand over to Sławek to do his own introduction, and then Simon after that.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sławek Zajac. I will also work for developer relations for BlackBerry out of Canada, and I work on the NDK Cascades side with key partners and vendors on bringing BlackBerry 10 applications.
Hello, I'm Simon Hain from Germany, and I work for i6-7 as a developer. We're a major partner of BlackBerry in Germany.
Long-term partner, absolutely.
Long-term partner. And yeah, we've ported one of our main applications over to BlackBerry 10, and I will show a bit of it later.
So that's, as with regards to the session, the way the session is structured, one thing to point out is that, unfortunately, we can't offer you a quick fix. There is no one-button solution that, takes your COD file and converts it into a bar file. So that's the bad news, but the good news is, this is why we've got the session. We want to introduce the different strategies that we make available with the tools, with the SDKs, in order to take your IP over to BlackBerry 10, your application that you have created for the BlackBerry Java OS, and show you how we can go about actually converting that or porting that to the BlackBerry 10 platform. Just out of interest, who's got a BlackBerry Java application here? Okay. So it's the right audience. I just want to make sure, not that I'm in the wrong session here. But like I said, we're going to introduce different strategies that you can employ in order to port your application. And very important, Simon's part of the session. We actually have a look at a case study. How did we go about, or how did i6-7, Simon, how did they go about, porting that application? What are a couple of the good to knows, the little tips and tricks, that you only learn in the real world as you're actually porting a project. And then time allowing at the end, we'll have a Q&A session. So by all means, if you have got, that burning question, as we cover some of the content, ask. If we cover it later on, we'll tell you that we'll cover that later on in the presentation. Or, if you can hold off to the Q&A session at the end. If we run out of time, we'll just move that to the Ask the Expert areas after this session. I don't think anybody of us has got anything on. Awesome. No questions so far? Well, then let's have a look at what those different strategies of porting, are that we provide. And of course, this should look very familiar if you have seen any of the keynotes over the past year, any of the general introductory sessions. We have got different SDKs that we provide. HTML5 and WebWorks being one of them. The Android runtime, if you were in the previous session here, obviously you would know already a lot about that. So the Android runtime allowing you to take an APK file and, with pretty much one click of a button, convert that into a bar file. And then, of course, the Cascades, the native approach, being able to, easily create that signature look and feel for an application that you're porting across to the BlackBerry 10 platform. What we start off with, we have a look at the HTML5 WebWorks approach and see, what are the couple of the things that we need to keep in consideration, that we need to consider as we do our porting process. Of course, here at the heart of the proposition is the awesome WebKit rendering engine that is included on the BlackBerry 10 platform. I just had a look yesterday. I was running a lab over there, and for that, I was looking at the HTML5 test website. And actually, if you look at whether you do that from a device or from a desktop browser, you can look at, how does the browsers, how do they compare, what's the leaderboard with regards to HTML5 support. And there, with 485 points, your BlackBerry 10 browser is actually the best mobile phone browser with regards to support of HTML5. So, we have got a very strong track record, actually, since the launch of Playbook with regards to HTML5 web support standards and the evolving standards. So, at the core, like I said, the WebKit rendering engine. A couple of the considerations. If you look at a Java application, if you look at your Java application at the moment, then probably one of the most work-intensive parts of that application would have been the user interface. Having to create that, unless you use a framework like Polish, having to create that, in code, your views and controllers, your business logic, and your UI. And how that translates, to a WebWorks application. Of course, at that point, we use completely different technology, but we have got HTML5 and CSS to do our layout. And, some would argue, I probably would, support them in that, it's probably a lot easier to create your user interface using HTML5 and CSS. Being able to use CSS to skin your application and easily make changes to that system-wide or application-wide, is certainly a lot more comfortable and a lot more convenient than in your old Java application. From a business logic perspective, you will have to use JavaScript, so that's the option, on that side. But then when you actually look at some additional APIs, there you're looking at from an application logic, like I said, JavaScript. But then also you have got the WebWorks SDK, which provides, phone APIs. So being able to link into the PIM application, the calendar, making use of some of the hardware features of the platform. And at that point, with regards to on the WebWorks side, we try and follow very much the Apache Cordova approach, so we're trying to be as compatible as possible. But of course, there may be some information or some hardware features which are not supported by Apache Cordova. So the phone gap approach at the moment. So at that point, you would have to use BlackBerry specific JavaScript objects if they're available in the WebWorks SDK. Now, if there is any functionality that you require within your application, which is not covered by the WebWorks SDK, then you also have the capabilities to create your own custom extensions. So one of my colleagues, for example, is doing a session of where he had to speak to an external device via UDP, via the Wi-Fi network. There was nothing in the WebWorks SDK that you could make use of. So he created an extension, a WebWorks extension, to use UDP communication to that external device. So that is definitely a possibility if there's an API, if there's certain functionality that is available on the device, but that isn't exposed as a WebWorks a JavaScript API yet, then you can create that yourself. And actually, if you go to the GitHub website, blackberry.github.com, you can drill down to the different areas. There's plenty of samples for the native development approach, and there's a lot of examples as well for WebWorks. And actually, the whole WebWorks SDK itself is available in the open source as a GitHub repository. Somebody mentioned yesterday that some 13-year-old kid, if I understood that correctly, ported actually the Mac version of the WebWorks SDK to Linux as well, which is not supported by us currently. Sorry? 13 years old. That was, if my memory serves me right, it's not as reliable as it used to be, but that's what the gentleman suggested yesterday. So anyway, point being, if there is functionality that is not available, create your own extension. If you look at the GitHub community, there's already a community section for custom extensions. So check there whether the functionality has already been developed by somebody else. If not, by all means, write it yourself. And if you do write an extension yourself because you have the need, I'd strongly encourage you to consider contributing that to the community as well. There's obviously a lot of people that have put in a lot of work in order to make additional extensions available to you and to make use of them wherever it makes sense. And then also, why not contribute back? With regards to, writing your application, of course, we also, if you go down to the showcase, you see that there's a lot of partners, development partners there. And some of these have been like Sencha. They are down in the showcase. So we would always encourage you to make use of third-party frameworks where it makes sense for you. From a BBUI perspective, that allows you to, it's obviously a framework that we created ourselves, or our development team, our browser development team, initially created that. And that allows you to create, to copy or to mimic that, signature look and feel, which you probably used to from Cascades by now, looking at all the other presentations, but to replicate that in a WebWorks environment. But then also, like for UI perspective, it doesn't really matter, whether you're using BBUI, Sencha, Dojo, jQuery, or any of the other frameworks. Again, like do a comparison and use the one that makes most sense for you. If you have already web resources that make use of jQuery, that may be a better approach than, one of the other ones. But that really depends on your environment. And then, of course, like you need to have a look at your Java application and identify, those APIs that need to be used as part of the WebWorks SDK. I mentioned here a couple of the ones: push APIs, BBM integration. Those are there, of course, but then the custom extensions would have to be covered. Would have to cover those sections that are not available as part of the WebWorks SDK. And again, the GitHub community, I mentioned this already. There is a lot of projects there. There's a lot of repositories there, whether that's samples, whether that's frameworks that you can make use of. And do make use of those. Like I said, the custom extensions, there's a whole repository there that the community contributed. But then also the WebKit Ripple, the WebKit engine itself, Ripple, as an emulator that allows you to have a look at your web project inside the browser. It's a Chrome extension. Have a look at that inside the browser and actually see what does my application render like on a Q10, on a Z10. And there's more devices that are supported by Ripple itself. WebWorks, I mentioned already, is completely out in the open source, and the samples, of course, I mentioned those as well. And there is another session still today at 1 o'clock. So there is a Web API deep dive session, in this particular case, leveraging the PIM APIs and the invocation. And doing one thing definitely worth considering from an invocation perspective, don't forget about that, because you can invoke other applications functionality on the device and either embed that as a card in your application, or indeed, just invoke the whole third party or first party application. More information, the website already, the developer website, the HTML5 section has all of the API references available, as well as links to the samples, tutorials, and so on. Next thing to cover off quickly is the Android runtime that we provide as of version 2.0 of Playbook OS, and of course as part of the BlackBerry 10 OS as well. And here, literally, we're looking at if you have got an APK file, you have an existing Android application, literally to run that through a repackaging application and rebundle that into a bar file, sign that, and being able to deploy that to a device and make that available through Upworld, through BlackBerry World, sorry, for sale as well. As regards to compatibility, we reckon about 70% of all Android applications are compatible today, right? That's without any changes, without any code changes. You just repackage, deploy it to a BlackBerry 10 device, and it'll work without any changes. But there are certain limitations with regards to the runtime. For those of you that were in the previous session, you would have heard a lot more about the limitations, as well as the roadmap to address some of those limitations. Some of them, of course, down to hardware. Others are down to OS limitations. And the product management team looking after the Android runtime, they have a prioritized list of what they need to address, or what they're going to address in the near future. A couple of the examples that are worth noting is probably one of the biggest one is that we do not support native libraries. So JNI, Java Native Interface, as part of the Android runtime, we do not support that support. So if you make use of native libraries, then we would probably encourage you to use a native development approach on a platform. If you need that performance for performance reasons, or And then we probably would point you into our own native development tools. Google Maps. So there's a couple of platform services, where we have competing offerings, advertisement, payment. I'll say a couple of words about that in a second as well. Where it doesn't necessarily make sense for us to support the Google variants, obviously, because there is monetization attached to that as well. Having said that, Payment SDK actually is supported as of version 2.1 of the Playbook OS and BlackBerry 10, with one slight code change. We do actually support the payment APIs, the Google payment APIs, and they are mapped through the runtime all the way to our BlackBerry World payment engine. Of course, you need to set up products, your virtual goods in BlackBerry World there as well. But wherever it makes sense, we do actually see how we can support those APIs, and it's a question of time, of course, as well. I mentioned priorities. To make those support for those available. Another one of note that is supported now is C2DM, so cloud to device, where we're currently not supporting Google Cloud Messages, but certainly C2DM standard and Google Cloud Messages at some point in the future. Again, it's a question of priorities. Definitely worthwhile noting, and Simon was quite right to point that out. Since the particular case study that we look at is probably more used in the enterprise space, Android runtime applications are only run in the personal perimeter. So you cannot, if you have got a BlackBerry Enterprise Server 10, you cannot push out an Android runtime application. So you cannot install an Android application inside the corporate perimeter. Right? So that goes back to balance. We do have, of course, documented a full API support, what's supported, what's not. And also you see for some of the not supported APIs, like for example Google Maps, we have got some documented workarounds as well that you can make use of in your application fairly easily in order to make functionality available. There is different tools that we allow you to use in order to convert your Android application. Probably the easiest one is the online conversion tool. So it's literally if you go to developer.blackberry.com/Android, there's a web page that allows you to pretty much specify the APK on your local machine. It downloads all of the necessary conversion tools, does the conversion, prints out a report, which of the APIs are supported, which ones are not supported, and then gives you a recommendation whether it is ready for upload, and then you can actually from that web page upload it for BlackBerry World, provided you've got a vendor account, provided you've got code signing keys, can upload it straight from there. If you are heavily involved in Android development, you probably have the Eclipse installed anyway, so you may as well install the Eclipse plugin, which provides those conversion tools very conveniently. For batch conversion, or if you, like myself, are a dinosaur and like to use a command line, there are command line tools. So you literally can, provided you've got the APK file there, you can do the conversion, can do the code signing, and the whole conversion into a bar file there as well. And of course, the simulators support those as well, the Android runtime applications. I'm handing over to Sławek now, who's going to cover the native side of things.
Thanks, Michael. So my talk is going to be a prelude to Simon's experience session. So basically, I want to introduce Cascades and kind of outline some of the similarities between Cascades' native framework and Java. So to start out with, I think it's fair to say that doing your application in Cascades provides you with the best user experience, and as we have seen, if you look at some of the apps in the app world, you will see that Cascades applications are some of the best ones that we have there right now, and that will be coming as well. So I'm sure many of you, if you've attended the Cascade sessions, you have seen the architecture slides. I just want to briefly mention, for those of you who haven't attended, that Cascades is our native framework. It's built on top of Qt Core and provides you with the capability to write beautiful, rich graphical applications. So the key word is beautiful. I think Cascades, being the framework, was built with the thought in mind that the applications should look stunning, and so the controls and the tooling and the design principles combined together are meant to give you that experience. So as you'll see, you'll get many things in Cascades for free, which you will not get from other frameworks. So to start out with, when you're thinking about bringing your Java application onto BlackBerry 10, what are some of the first things that you need to think about? And so from my experience working with developers, when I look at where they start out with, one of the first things that I tell them is start out with the user UI guidelines. And so we have the UI guidelines online, and we have just updated them to the 10.1, which includes the touch query form factor as well. But what those really tell you is how to lay out your application. And I think that really matters, because when you're coming from Java, we're used to the menus. We're used to a different experience. And when you come to BlackBerry 10, you realize that the UI framework is completely different. So it's very important that you start here and you build from that. So I highly recommend this is your first step as you look at converting a Java application to BlackBerry 10, because it's going to give you a real good idea of how to lay out your screens and how to design your user interface. And I think applications that follow the UI guidelines really, are well reviewed and well received by the public. So what makes Cascade so great? I've already touched upon it briefly. Well, the signature controls that you have built in for you, and it's also highly optimized. Unlike other frameworks, Cascades was built with speed in mind, and so I'm going to discuss, where that speed comes from a little bit later. But giving you that speed is really important, because that's what drives the user adaptability, user experience, and it's really built with flexibility in mind. So if you're a C++ developer, there is an option for you. But if you're not a C++ developer, maybe you're coming from Java, maybe you'd be more comfortable with a QML approach to try and port a lot of the user interface in QML, and then bring some of the application logic to C++. And so Java being an object-oriented language, you can kind of map the classes, and I'll have a little bit on that later on. But then you can bring your UI logic in QML. So another thing about Cascades and what makes it really good is that you get a lot of things for free. And so we now support another device form factor, as you have seen, the touch query. And Cascades will actually scale your component. And in some cases, it will scale your assets. And there are, we have the cases outlined on our website. So, for example, if you 9-slice, or if you partition your images in such a way that they're scalable, Cascades will actually scale them properly for different form factor of the device. And also provides you with different things like keyboard shortcuts that really come for free. So if you use another framework like the Android runtime or in some cases web frameworks, you will not get those things for free. You'll have to use web technologies to do them yourselves. So let's go back in what we had in Java. The way the UI was rendered, and it was and we're all familiar with that as Java developers. And I was a Java developer for many years on the old BlackBerry platform as well. And so, our UI framework back in the day wasn't really that powerful. So if you wanted to get beyond the standard components and really build on what was offered there, you'd have to use the paint method. And the paint method was really powerful. It gave you with the capabilities to pretty much draw on canvas whatever you wanted. So if you wanted a list view, you wanted to enhance it, you could make it real nice by painting certain components on canvas. But what that really meant is that if you wanted to actually override some components, and in a lot of cases you had to because the framework wasn't really that rich, you'd pretty much override the paint method all the time. And so the way the graphics was rendered by the system was the rendering engine would actually call your paint method and execute the paint functions there, the draw a rectangle, fill a rectangle functions, and it would do it for every component. So if you happened to have some code that maybe would slow down that paint function, you could slow down the whole UI. And so you've seen in the Java applications, as powerful as it was, if you really knew what you were doing, you could really get a good masterpiece of a UI. But in a lot of cases, we've seen that a lot of developers kind of shot themselves in the foot, and they had slowdowns in their user interface. So, where does Cascade differ, right? So, a lot of developers coming from Java, they ask, well, where's my paint method? How do I extend components? And how does the UI framework work? So, there is no more paint method. What happens is you actually just provide the scene in Cascade. So you build a scene, a graph of the UI, and the rendering engine actually paints the scene. So what does that mean? I mean, how would you build a custom component in Cascades? Essentially, instead of overriding a paint method, we use compositions. So basically, you would use the existing components and you would try to combine existing components into a custom component. Now, that has certain limitations with it. So for example, it's not as rich an approach, but it obviously lends itself to better performance. So we're building the capabilities to extend Cascades to provide you with more flexibility to build custom components, but it's not as rich as, let's say, painting on canvas. And if you're interested in more as to the approach we took and where we're going with it, there's a good blog post here with a link provided. But essentially the point here is that what happens with modern GPUs, when you don't do the paint method yourself, the modern GPUs are able to optimize on how they want to paint the UI. So they may actually group certain components that they want to paint first, and that way they can optimize better. So I think that's why you can see such better performance in Cascades than you saw in the other frameworks. So let's look at some of the mappings of the APIs I mentioned. So we're working on the porting guide right now. We've released a blog post, introductory blog post with this table. We're going to be building on that. But your first step would be to map some of the classes and basically look at your networking APIs. If you're using network and then try to map that to Cascade. Same for file access, location, and PIM, and other components. So that's the easy part. In terms of application lifecycle, there are a few differences that I think are worth outlining. So on BlackBerry 10, right now, as of this time, we have three possible states for the application. We have the foreground state, where your application is completely in the foreground, the background state, and the stop state. So when you're in the background state, that means you're in the active cover and your application is still running. And if you want your application to be running when a user switches to another screen, so if they go to the tiles, you have to actually request to be running in the background. There's a permission setting that you actually have to set. Now, how does that differ from the days of Java and what you had on Java? So we have the capability on BlackBerry 10 right now to run in the background, but the application has to be visible to the user, so it's in one of the tiles. This differs from the way things were in Java, where we could actually auto-start applications. So you could start an application when the system started and have it running without the UI, so what we call the headless support. So that is coming on BlackBerry 10. It was announced that it's coming in the near future. Now, in terms of auto-start, I would say one option to actually get around this, if you need to start your application, is to use the push framework. So with the push framework, you can start your application. So that means your application is going to be brought into one of the covers. So I think that is the approach I would take if you need to start your application, or let's say if you're delivering some set of news, and you can just use the push framework and have the application start. Now, in terms of integrating with the platforms, the only thing I want to say is, like in the old Java days, if you're an old Java developer, we had the notion of a super app, an app that integrated with various services and that we provided in various capabilities of the device. And we also have the same on BlackBerry 10. And so using the Invoke framework, you can actually launch various applications and various cards. I just want to outline the differences between invoke of an application and invoke of a card. So there are different ways to invoke. So for example, if you want inside your application, and inside your BlackBerry 10 application, to invoke a PDF viewer, you can invoke the PDF application itself, and that's going to launch another application and pass your PDF file to it. Or you can invoke the PDF viewer card, which is just going to be another navigation pane inside your application. I prefer that method for most applications. Always look if there's a card available. And for a lot of them, there is. So because that doesn't break the flow of your application, you can actually peek into the navigation pane. So that is what you should be looking for in BlackBerry 10. In terms of PIM integration, we have the same for calendar, for contacts, contact picker, and you can create your own calendar entries as well using the ICS format. So you can put whatever the ICS format supports there, images, whatnot, HTML5 format as well. In terms of data storage, file system was there in Java. Obviously, it was much more limited than what we have in BlackBerry 10. But I think the key thing that you had with your Java applications, you had the persistent store or the MIDP RMS, and a lot of that could be replaced with queue settings, which is just a simple mapping, persistent mapping table. Or you can actually go more sophisticated with SQLite, and if you have some relational data, that is also an option for you. In terms of listeners, on Java, everything was done with listeners. So when you're looking at the UI framework, if you have to register a listener for a button push, or whenever you just scroll to the bottom of the list or something like that, you had to manage a lot of listeners in your Java application. I think that's been cleaned up a lot with signals and slots. So it makes things a lot simpler. We have, some things to do, some work to do in terms of the IDE to help you trace, which signals are mapped to which slots. But I think it makes things a lot cleaner, and you don't need to do a lot of listener management, and it's easy to connect signals together. So it's a lot cleaner than what you had in Java. I think that should be a simple process, but it's something to keep in mind. Just briefly, I want to touch upon the social integration. I think we're better in there with BlackBerry 10 than the Java platform was. In terms of BBN, you have the same integration. In terms of Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, we have certain cards that are available, so you can invoke a card and you can share your status updates or and share pictures and share various items. But for anything beyond that, there's also another option, which is using your custom web view in Cascades and using OAuth. And we have an open source OAuth library which you can explore. And I've tried it in some samples, and it works very well. So about platform services, obviously one of the most important platform services is the push service. It's evenly supported now on both platforms. I think there are a lot of similarities there. In terms of BBM, as I mentioned, they're both supported. Ad services are also there on BlackBerry 10 as they were in Java, and so is the payment SDK. So I think you have an even mapping if your applications use those services. So to learn more about some of the native capabilities, feel free to explore the native API deep dive session. And now I want to pass it over to Simon, who is going to talk about his experiences of actually porting an application onto BlackBerry 10.
Thank you. So we've ported one of our main business applications. It's a mobile client for SAP. I think many of you know it. If you don't know it, you probably don't need it. So all the content comes from a server. And here on the left side, you see the Java client. On the right side, the BlackBerry 10 client. And I think we managed to have it really similar. And yeah, all the data access runs over SOAP web services, which are offered by the server, so we don't have much choice there. And we implemented caching and offline access using SQLite. Then why did we go with a native framework? So our main reason was we did not have much HTML5 knowledge already, so it was we had to explore a new area anyhow. And yeah, a lot of the web service stuff would have been done in a native extension for HTML5, so we figured we can go full native anyhow. And yeah, we have already ported the application to Android, but as Android is not running in the corporate perimeter, that's not an option for us. And yeah, I think the native offers the best performance, and all the platform integration is already there. So the development process, I think that's the most important part. So I've started by taking a sample application from the website, and then added stuff to it until it broke, and then tried to figure out why. And yeah, tested, for example, networking, and then use more samples to add more functionality. So basically, you can look up Qt samples on the web and use a BlackBerry repository on GitHub. They have lots of samples for many use cases. And yeah, was kind of going for single issues. So if I wanted to figure out how to do something, I tried to find a sample that covered that and implemented it. Then the UI is kind of separated now from the native code. And that was the biggest challenge for us to get the UI speaking to the native components. So I will show a lot of code samples. And yeah, localization is very important, but there was another session covering that in detail. And in the end, we are now in the phase to implement functionality and integration. So for example, show a route on the map, add the contact application, invoke the phone application, and so on. So for the UI, in Cascades, you don't have the paint method, as was already pointed out. You use standard components, like the title bar, labels, buttons. So a button now offers an image component built in, and we've extended it to download the image from the internet. And you can have hidden containers and just switch them on to visible. So, for example, if you click on a button, you can just switch a container to visible and it's already there. And yeah, scrolling is also automatic. I will show that with my application a bit later. Then we have translated the menu structure we are using. So here, always on the left, is a BlackBerry application where you press the menu key and on the BB10, it's full gesture-based. So you pull down for the application menu to get into the settings or about screen or the lock screen. And for the context menu, you have a long press. So if you press something short, for example, we have a link, you press it short, it opens the link. And if you have a long press, it opens the context menu where you have all the options, like in this sample, call phone, send email, show map, or add to contacts. So as I said, most important part was to connect the QML and the native code. And here in the first code sample, you register a custom type from the native to have it visible in the QML. You just add this code line, and then it's there in QML, and you can use it. Just in this container, you write remote image view, and that's it. Then it's displayed on the screen, so it's very easy to use. But it's important, to have it on the right spot. And you can just copy it from the samples, and then if it's no longer working, you did something wrong. Then, you can publish utility classes, for example, by using setContext property. So in this sample, we wrote a textutil class to format strings, for example, and do all the things that are a bit difficult in JavaScript. And you can see there the yellow textutil, that's the name of it in the QML file. And in QML, you can just use it with textutil dot and then the function name. To make a function callable from QML, you use qInvocable, it's a macro, and you just write it in front of your native application name to make it callable from the QML. So in this sample here, the textutil is called to get the datetime text from a date and then print it out as a string on this label. So the next important part is properties. If you want to access any attribute from a native class, you use a qProperty. And you have a get method, a set method, or whatever, and just add the qProperty macro, and you can then use in QML this attribute with its name. So the QML registered name here is the class name, which we used to register before, and then we can just use .iconurl to access the property. And in some cases, you don't have the connection and want to do something from the native, you can ask the scene to find the child using the name. So it's not, they said it's not good to do that, but it works. So it's, if the performance is not too important, I think it's not very slow, but you find the QML class in native and can invoke all the functions on it. And as was already said, with the listeners, there are no more listeners basically, but you use signals and slots. So in Qt, we just have a signal, show preferences, and the QML, it connects to the signal and pushes a screen to show the preferences. So we don't do any UI interaction directly from the C++, but we send signals to the QML to have all the UI separate from the native code. And of course, one of the most important parts when you develop is to find errors and hunt bugs. And the tooling is a bit limited at the moment. So you get error 1, error 2, or error 3. There are no more errors. And then you have to find out what it actually is. So yeah, my main part was do headers and sources match. So if you write something in a header file, it has to be there in the source file as well. And if you delete it from one, it does no longer compile and says error 1, and then you look for it until you find it. And the project file is very important. So what I figured out to just port my package structure from the Java project to the BB10 project, and compiled. It compiled well, but it didn't run. So I had to add all the sources and header files, all the folders in the sources and header section in the profile to get it to run again. And then QObject is very important. So I've used QObject in nearly all my classes because otherwise there are no signals and slots. And yeah, you have to check if it's used correctly. Then something very new for me as a Java developer was pointers. So variables and pointers, they have to be initialized. Otherwise, they just point somewhere and you don't really know what happens. So if you have a Boolean, it can be true, false, or something else. And that's really, yeah, you have to think about it, and afterwards it's all okay. But if you forget to initialize it and your program does something strange, this is one of the points where you can look. And then the segmentation fault. So it's basically a null pointer, and if you have a pointer somewhere and nothing is in it, you get a seg fault, the application crashes, and you can use the debug mode. Sometimes it shows you where it crashed, and sometimes you just have to look for it manually. And there's qdebug on the Qt side and console log on the QML. So do lots of logging. And on the QML side, it's very handy. You can change the QML on runtime and add more logging and then just execute it again without recompiling or relaunching the application. So memory management, that was also totally new for me. So in Java, you have garbage collection, and you can do whatever, and it gets collected afterwards. In C++, in Qt, you have to take care of it all yourself and delete it. And yeah, it was one of the things I learned here on the BlackBerry JAM to use the QObject tree model. So you can add QObjects as a child and as a parent, and then you have only to delete the parent, and all the childs are deleted automatically. So if you create an object and then fill it with other objects, remember to set the parent to the parent object, and then manage the memory only for this one. And yeah, in QML, you can create UI elements dynamically by using create object, and they all have the page as their parent. And we added this code, was from the forums on pop transition ended. So it's a listener when you go back and the page is destroyed, you can call page destroy to actually free the memory. So, and now I can show my application. It's connected to the HDMI. So there it is. You see here lots of images. They are all downloaded dynamically from the internet. And it's an image view component for that. With an added label below. And yeah, if you click on one of the icons, it invokes a method in QML and loads a page. So now we can see this page was loaded from the cache from yesterday. So it does not need the network. And if we look up something, So it now queries the backend to give us a list of accounts that match our search. We can click on one to load the detail page. And now can scroll a bit down. There's a lot of stuff added there. So we have here just a label. And when you click on the label, a hidden container is opened. So when we click on contacts, for example, it opens a hidden container and displays the stuff that is there. Then if you pull down from the top, you get the application menu and can go into the settings, for example, or into About screen. And then if you do a long press, you open the context menu. Then you can slide to open it and, for example, call the phone or show it on map, display route, add to contact. So I can click the display route. Then it invokes the map application and asks it to calculate the route. So it takes a moment. But there it is. So if you want to go to Berlin. Yeah, here you can see the cover. So we implemented a cover. It's very easy to do. When you minimize the application, you can show other information, and now it says no workflows available, but we can add some. If we click on here, we get some demo workflows. And yeah, they are now in the hub, and if we minimize the application, you see the splat there, and it says 4 workflows. So if one of your employees wants to have vacation, for example, he can manage it using this application, and you get it in the inbox. But I think there are lots of your mails there, so we don't click on it. Yeah, so all the UI was done in QML, and yeah, all the data stuff is done in native. And I can show you a quick code sample on my laptop, how it is connected on a sample. Oh, it's in standby. Just one moment.
So maybe while we're waiting, how long did the process take for you to really learn QML and Qt and start, writing, get to this point?
Yeah, the C++ was completely new for me, and it took now about 2 or 3 months to get to this point, to have the application production ready for a beta. So it's already in BlackBerry World available for a demo client. And most of the part was easy. You have bool instead of boolean and qstring instead of string and so on. The object orientation is the same. And yeah, as I said, the most difficult part for me was to connect the QML with a native code. Mm-hmm. So now I have here a code sample for this en route, what I just showed. It's called here en route action. When you click on it in the UI, this is called. Then it looks up the address using a geocode service. And now I connect the signal from the geocode service to the error and success slot. And you can see them both below. So if there's an error with the geocoding, I just show a dialog. And if there's a success, I use invoke method to invoke a method on the container, the QML container. And the method is here a string onshore route. And we have some parameters, the latitude and the longitude, which are wrapped in qvariant. So this sounds a bit difficult, but it's actually just copy and paste from the sample, and then it works. So now I can show you the QML file. And here is a show root method. And I set the latitude and longitude to the invoker I defined as an attached object. And then I just say go. And then, yeah, the system does all the work for me.
QML is the UI part?
Yes, QML is the UI part. So you just use a page, then add a container, and then add components like more containers, label fields, and images, and so on.
Maybe you could show the QML previewer as well, since
Oh, I'm not sure if it's working, because we have custom classes in there. So it says, yeah, you see, BB platform is very custom. It's not working yet.
Yeah. So one of the limitations we have a QML previewer, so you can actually preview your UI of how it looks. One of the limitations right now is that when you have custom components, which in Simon's case, he created custom components by using composition, you can't use the previewer. So unfortunately, you actually have to deploy it to the simulator or the device to see how your UI looks.
Yes, and if you have only standard UI components, but some imports of your own stuff, you can just comment it out, and then the previewer works. But I hope they fix it soon.
Yeah, it's coming. It's coming very soon.
Oh. Yeah, so for more information, I have another session in the afternoon talking more about the data storage. So we have a very complex persistence layer where we store all our data, all our pages in SQL. And yeah, our Q&A session, we will continue it with Ask the Experts just outside of the room. Then I can suggest from my friend Ecke here, Open Data Space. So it's an open source application you can actually download from GitHub. And we used a lot of his UI work to understand how it works and yeah, sometimes also copy it. And yeah, you can download the application to check it out for free. And of course, the support forums where I'm very active. And if you have any questions there, you get usually very quick answers. And then one additional link that was very surprising for me about parameters in Java and C++, where you can learn something new probably.
So thank you. Is this on? Thanks very much. I think we have got a couple of minutes. I just got the 5-minute sign. Is this on? It's on now. I just got the 5-minute sign to go. So we can take a couple of questions. Anything that goes over and beyond, time-wise, we need to just take into the Ask the Expert area. Thanks very much, Simon. Thank you very much that was very insightful. Questions, anybody? We have got a floating microphone. Sorry. It's not quite floating. Attached to a lady back there. No questions? Excellent. Sorry, was that a question? No? We'll be hanging around for a few minutes in the Ask the Expert area. Thanks very much for your time then, and enjoy the rest of the show. Thank you.